To everyone who's here, actually exceedingly warm welcome to everyone that's here. I was a little bit worried that we weren't actually going to get a quorum today. So first of all, apologies. We've got Councillor Brewer who's not well, Councillor Cooper, Clow, Member Taipiri, Member Ngamani, Councillor Quacks, Councillor Stewart and Councillor Watson for lateness. Oh, so Member Wilcox is standing in for David Taipiri. Any other?
Second.
No, I'll move that. Seconded. Councillor Filipaina. I'll put that. All those in favour, please say aye.
Aye.
Against? Carried. Any declarations of interest? No. Welcome, Councillor Walker. I'll move the confirmation of the minutes for 18th. Thank you, Councillor Walker. Straight into it, in the door and into it. I'll put that. All those in favour, please say aye.
Aye.
Against? Carried. Petitions, there are none. Public input, there was none and none requested. But while I'm here, seeing this is the last meeting of this committee, I'm actually going to acknowledge our public. Robin Hill, Shirley Taylor, Veronica Nopes, who have been our public all the way through for the last kind of 6 years and have been our stalwart public. And I you don't realise how much you kind of get used to, in a good way, people being there. And I just want to acknowledge these wonderful women, mostly 2, often 3 of you who are here through everything. So it's been lovely to have you here. Really appreciate it.
We're the public.
Yay for the public. It's a fantastic thing. And local board input, there is none, but I welcome Lisa White, who's here. Welcome, Lisa. And you may, I think when we get to the structure plan discussion, you're welcome to discuss then. I think that makes more sense. Notice of extraordinary business, notices of motion, there are none. So we move on to reports pending. Any discussion on that? I'm happy to move the update. Councillor Darby, second. All those in favour, please say aye. Against? Carried. Now, item number 10 is our work programme and review of progress. I want to just take this moment to acknowledge you as a committee. When you have a look back at some of the work that's been done over the last little while, there's been a huge amount achieved, and that's thanks to you as a hard-working committee. Basically, this committee has done pretty much most of the heavy lifting, some of the very, very hard work that's been done to drive that work program forward, and of course no less heavy lifting than the unitary plan. So I want to acknowledge Councillor Filipaina, who dealt with the bulk of the unitary plan work in this last term. Just before I go through some of our highlights, I want to warmly acknowledge my Deputy Chair, Councillor Darby. Chris, you've been fantastic to work with, and I think we've been the perfect combination. Chris is all detail, I'm all big picture. If we'd only been detail, we would have got nowhere. If we'd been only big picture, we would have got nowhere. So Chris, thank you. Thank you for your attention to the hard questions that often don't get asked. It's hugely appreciated, and you've been a powerhouse of support. I want to just touch on, as I said, the unitary plan. Huge, lots of words spoken, enormous. I think you were the most extraordinary bunch of people to do this, and I salute all of you. We've approved 154 special housing areas with a capacity for 62,500 dwellings. That's, the hard yards, and it's huge. Taken a lot of flack in the media, a lot of questions still to be addressed, but it was the right thing to do. We've landed the future land supply strategy, the transport for urban growth plan, the Aotea and downtown frameworks, the housing plan, which is, still, I think, the thing that we need to really grasp in the next term. We've dealt with the Selwyn Foundation partnership, well interrogated. well asked, well thought through, and Council's housing portfolio, housing for older adult portfolio, is in safe hands. And Councillor Casey, thank you for being an absolute terrier through that process to make sure that we get the best result. Really appreciated. Our port study, difficult time. I think we're getting to a better place with that. We've dealt with heaps of submissions, and the one today, yet another Prodcom submission. We've dealt with them well. We've thought them through well, and hopefully government will take our views on board. And finally, things in progress. The Tamaki project, thank you Councillor Crum for your role in that. Panuku, we've started to really make progress and get traction with the work that Panuku's doing, and we're starting to understand exactly the potential of this workhorse of council to make transformative change. So again, to you as a committee, I think you've been extraordinary. I know I've had to be a grumpy chair from time to time. For that I apologise. I don't always get it right, and sometimes I've had to be a bit tougher than perhaps was warranted, and I know that might have annoyed you all, but that's just how life goes. So I thank you for your forbearance and for your general good humour and goodwill to get on with the job. So with those words, the Auckland Development Work Programme, I'd like to move that, and just wonder, Catherine, did you want to say? So Catherine's here to answer any questions if needed. Councillor Darby.
Well, just on that note, before we move to the business proper there, and I acknowledge you, Councillor Hulson, Deputy Mayor. This is a committee that often finds itself absolutely under the pump, and around this table, we're not here to agree with each other. We're here to interrogate items and get stuck in, and I think we've all done that on this committee. Almost like no other committee. I think that we've had some tough items before us, and look back and the rear view mirror. It's the Port Future study. That was a tough one for us, and we found ourselves on different sides. And right now, today, we're together on the same side, I think. And with the SHAs, different sides. Today, same side. Unitary plan, different sides, same side. It's all about the ultimate outcome and how it fits into today's Auckland, planning for futures Auckland, the future Auckland. But Deputy Mayor, ultimately though, it is the person at the top that wears it, and the Mayor knows this well. The criticism comes in waves when you're embarking on things. The accolades are very light when you achieve the outcomes. But that is, we all know that is how the job is, and we don't sit here waiting for the accolades. But we've got to do the job well. And I take my hat off to you. You have found yourself, we have found ourselves, but particularly you, under the pump on some extremely grunty issues that we had to face up to in Auckland. And the biggest, of course, and I don't think there will be a chair that will, for the next 20 years, that's going to have to deal with the unitary plan as you dealt with it. That was not just a 3-year task. That was it's actually a 5-year work program all up. It started about a year after the first new Auckland Council came in. So in probably late 11, that's when you started with the unitary plan. Big issues, and you've mentioned most of them. Those quarter plans, I think, are amazing. Port Future study I mentioned, the SHA's housing accord, and in behind that, it's not just the SHAs or the housing accord. In behind, unseen to most of us, is someone's cell phone number showing up, and it's that minister, and it's this minister, and it's dealing with questions straight out of cabinet, and responding, being nimble on your toes, knowing your business, and keeping government with us and keeping us with government to deliver the outcome that Auckland expects of us. Tamaki regeneration, huge. Hobsonville, phenomenal. You go out there now and you look at how people are living. What a showcase for the future of Auckland. It's just remarkable. Housing for the elderly, I think, is going to be our new Hobsonville. It's going to be stunning. We've got a lot of work to do there. And again, that's all out of this committee's work led by you, Deputy Mayor. One of the big ones that I think is going to deliver huge yards in the future is the marriage of 2 of our CCOs, which came out of this committee. It was recommendations out of this committee, and that's that magic of Waterfront Auckland being merged up with the real estate expertise of ACPL into Development Auckland, and going out from the waterfront and giving that magic a spread into Manukau, Onehunga, Takapuna, Northcote, Henderson, etc. We're on the way, early days. We haven't seen the fruits of that yet. It's all planning, but it will have product and great outcomes at the end. Madam Chair, you've headed up all of that. I'm just really chuffed to be given the role by the Mayor almost 3 years ago. I've loved it. It's been tough at times, but whoever comes to this job in the future will be facing similar things. There's tough work to be done around here, and you have certainly, in my eyes, and I think all of us, have delivered the outputs, the outcomes that Aucklanders, all 1.5 million of us, expect of this community, and I'm sure they're accolading you too. Thank you.
Thank you. That's very exceedingly generous, Councillor Darby. Often it feels like, and I know Councillor Webster and I talk about this, a good day feels like a day when there's only 2 knives in your bag and not 10. So, you know, every now and again it's very nice to just put those down and acknowledge when things are going well. Hugely appreciated. So I've moved it. You've seconded the progress report. Any questions? If not, I'll put that. All those in favour, please say aye.
Aye.
Against, carried. And I know I'll make some comments at the end, but of course the staff role in this is absolutely key, and we might talk about that at the end of the meeting. Summary of information memos and briefings, that is for interest. I'll move the receipt of that summary. Is there a seconder for that? Councillor Penrose, thank you. All those in favour, please say aye. Against, carried. So we move on to the Transport for Future Urban Growth update. Welcome, thanks David and team. Hopefully everyone's got the presentation in front of them.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Thank you, councillors. Today we're giving an update on the Transport for Future Urban Growth. I have with me today members from the Transport for Future Growth Alliance, well known to you, most likely Matt Rednall from Auckland Transport and Solar from New Zealand Transport Agency. Just to put this into context, the Transport for Future Urban Growth Alliance project was initiated after the adoption of the Future Urban Land Supply Strategy, which was adopted by this committee November last year. In part of that strategy, we set out a sequencing process for 11,000 hectares of land in areas designated future urban within the proposed Auckland Unitary Plan. Subsequently, and with our recommendations of the independent hearing panel and the adoption of those by council, that has grown to close to 12,000 hectares. So the Alliance has undertaken a comprehensive business case approach to examine a future transport network to allow the timely urbanisation of these areas that are designated future urban. It's been a comprehensive process and an ongoing process. Today, this update will provide, I suppose, the finalisation of the second phase of this process, which we are putting together the strategic transport network. In terms of the business cases, what they call the program business case phase. In this, it will allow to have a stab at what the strategic network should be, and from that it will allow better planning certainty, and it's a step of the process of understanding the financial implications of building this transport network, which will be coming to Council and the NZ, New Zealand Transport Agency, in future funding applications, and we'll see those in future long-term plans. I suppose what we will be updating today will be the results of the second phase of consultation that has been taken place, and also we'll be outlining a preferred strategic transport set of maps, and we will be recommending the endorsement of these maps, and also we're asking for your agreement to do further detailed work on the components of these maps and the projects that make them up. So Matt will now give an overview and presentation on where we've got since April last year, and then we'll take questions.
Lovely, thank you.
Thanks, David. Good morning, councillors. As as David said, we'll run through some of the background information, but many of you would have seen this previously, and then we'll identify the results of the feedback, and then identify the preferred networks that are going forward to the Auckland Transport and New Zealand Transport Agency boards this month and next month. So just to confirm the background. So the study looked at the future urban land supply strategy areas, and we really built on those and looked at the decisions that came forward from the unitary plan, how they actually added on to those. So then we went forward. So really the partnership of the Transport Future Urban Growth Team came together in late 2015 after the adoption of the Future Urban Land Supply Strategy to identify a strategic transport network that would connect these future urban areas to the current urban zones over the next 30 years. We presented the results of the first round of consultation to you in 2016, and since then we've completed the second round of consultation, and we've identified a preferred network that overall delivers a multimodal response to growth and is estimated to cost $7.6 billion over the next 30 years. And the work that we've done for this project has really been an input into ATAP. That cost has been incorporated within the body of work that the council has seen for ATAP and will be identified later on today. And it really supports those early investment priorities about route protecting the network and then prioritising those early builds to see the delivery of housing and jobs in these areas. So in terms of the public feedback that we got, we undertook a number of consultation processes where we had about 25,000 views to our webpage, and we had over 23 public events and about 30,000 households contacted. We also engaged with the business community and undertook some commercial operator surveys to understand how the future networks and their current issues could be overcome with looking at future networks. So overall, we had some very positive response from the public, but two of the key messages that came through were they wanted to see investment in transport solutions that would resolve today's issues as well as the future growth, and they wanted to see a commitment to those projects being brought forward and a strong emphasis on public transport. So that really led us to changes that we identified through making sure that we had a strong strategic public transport network with providing additional connections up to Orewa. It looked at us commencing the development of the Matakana Link Road in line with the Puhoi to Warkworth connection, so that was brought forward. And also it has led to the commencement of the New Zealand Transport Agency undertaking State Highway 16 and 22 safety improvements. So overall, through the work that we've undertaken through the consultation has really led us to actually undertaking some of those early progress. So in terms of the more detail of the responses we've had, so if I can go to the northwestern area, the feedback we had for the northwest was really about the public wants to see more improvements in the public transport network and also more alternative links for access into Kumu and improvements to the state highway network. So taking that into account, we've already started progressing the transport plan to align with the Whenuapai structure plan. As I said before, we've commenced the investigations for the State Highway 16 safety improvements, and we've also started the investigations into the Northwest Busway. As a priority on the next steps, we will be seeking to protect the rapid transit connections and explore the potential for passenger rail services to Huapai, and also investigating the alternate corridor to State Highway 16 as a priority. And included in the State Highway 16 and 18 improvements are also investigating more detailed investigations into the Northside Drive and Squadron road ramps that would be seen as a priority along with the State Highway 16 to 18 connections. If we now look at the South Auckland area, looking at Takanini, Drury and Opaheki and Pukekohe, again, very similar feedback around wanting to see improvements to the public transport network. And there we've already progressed the improvements to the Pukekohe station upgrade, and we'll be implementing the public transport new network in October this year, along with undertaking those safety improvement investigations. And really identified as a key priority in the next phase of work here is the development of the rail network to provide for electric trains from Papakura to Pukekohe, the progress of the State Highway 1 improvements from the current construction that's occurring now, taking that through down to Drury South, and also working with the Waikato Regional Council on improving access from the south and to the south of Auckland. So there's a copy of the plan that shows the zoning, and then if we look at the overlay of the aerials, we can see how those potential network improvements would look under an aerial view.
Chair, if we got questions later?
Would you, it might be easier,
Is that the
tell
end?
me how to work for you guys. Is it easier for us to ask place-based questions at each place, or should we?
Happy to
Should
come
we
back
get-
to them, I think.
It might be easier, I think, councillor Filipaina, so we'll come back to the west south. Yeah,
I don't want to get carried
I-
away and
I-
goes
good
from-
idea.
Okay.
You cool with that?
Yeah, I just wanted to see if they knew there was other places north past Drury,
I,
in the south area. I don't know whether they know Mangere is there and Hotara.
I suppose just to clarify, that is related to the areas that are identified in the future urban land supply strategy. So it's not a transport net for the whole of the region.
Takanini, Puke.
Just winding us up.
end of term. Okay, we'll plug on.
And then when we look further north, up to the future urban zones in Silverdale, Dairy Flat and around Ariwa, again, the community and businesses saw the need for improvements to the public transport system and also to the roading network through there. So in terms of what we're already progressing, we've progressed the designation for Penlink, and we're collaborating with the work that's been undertaken for the Northern Corridor improvements and the additional Waitemata Harbour crossing to make sure that we've got one alignment on those future public transport and state highway improvements that will be required. And through there, a priority is with the live zoning of the Wainui area is to ensure that we progress the transport improvements required to see the realisation of that live zoning. So that's particularly around the arterial networks and the connections, so we can stitch in that area with the current transport network. So in terms of further north up in Warkworth and the future urban zone in Warkworth, a lot of more detailed questions about responses from the community and businesses about ensuring that we can improve intersections, feedback around improvements to Hill Street, and being able to provide public transport improvements to connect better into the North Shore and down through to the CBD. So as I identified earlier, we've already started and moved forward with the Matakana Link Road investigation, so we can see the construction of that aligned with the Puhoi to Warkworth connection, and we've started construction of the Western Collector Falls Road Bridge. And in terms of identifying the priorities, in addition to that, we've undertaken the design reviews of the investigations into Hill Street and the need to develop the Western Collector on through to provide an alternate route around Warkworth. So there we can see the Western Collector being seen as that alternate route through there, and the Matakana Link Road linking across through the north there. So overall, we have progressed, as David identified, the programme business case, and now we're moving on to that phase where we're really going to do those detailed investigations to confirm the footprints and the land requirements for the preferred network, and then progress the funding streams through the next round of the Regional Land Transport Programme and the National Land Transport Programme. So for the next steps, we'll be presenting the programme business case to the boards, as I identified earlier, and identifying those priority investigations that have been identified through the ATAP progress and also the unitary plan outcomes. And while that's occurring, we'll be ensuring that we're delivering on those short-term safety and operational improvements that we've started to progress. So maybe if I'm pass to Ernst to provide a final.
Hi,
Madam Chair,
Ernst.
just one more comment. It's been, for the first time between the different agencies, we've had a long-term view we all have worked together on and hence agree on. So when business cases come forward for co-investment or we work on the motorway state highway network, we're doing so in the knowledge that we have pre-worked and pre-agreed this network, and it should really speed up the processes from here. We are also very committed not to hold up any processes, and so Auckland is growing fast, and it requires agility from us as well. So this will be a message from our board as a real commitment to help unlock these areas. This represents around 10% of what was presented to you yesterday as the whole ATEP package. Councillor, there's another 90% of expenditure projected for the next 30 years that is in the existing urban areas. So this is a 10% portion of the total investment plan to keep Auckland moving.
Thank you, and I think that's important to remember. So it's that kind of layering up of the whole ATAP plan, and this is growth-based development. Okay, so we've got questions. Councillor Filipaina.
Oh, I had mine answered, thank you.
You cool? Autada does exist.
Yeah, it does post there, so thank you.
Great. Councillor Casey.
I've got two questions. My first is on the slide numbered, where 5% request from business wanted rail to the airport, but there doesn't seem to be any action or investigation around that. And my question is not just what you're doing about that, but could you expand on the requested improvements to rail from the public, and did that include rail to the airport? I'm on this page here.
Yep. So the investigations about improving public transport to the airport, as the airport isn't one of the future urban zones, it's not included in here, but it is included in the current work streams that Auckland Transport and New Zealand Transport Agency are looking at, particularly around looking at the connection through to the CBD, and also in the improvements that are being looked at for improved public transport and state highway improvements along State Highway 20B. So it is being looked at the moment, and I think that goes to the part that Ernst identified. It's that other part of the other 90%. So it is part of the programme, but it's not included in the Transport for Future Urban Growth work.
So you're saying that heavy rail is included in the programme?
In terms of public transport improvements, so that work's being looked at about what would be that future mode in terms of State Highway 20B.
So that still includes heavy rail?
It's being looked at the moment about what modes is best along State Highway 20B, and in terms of the connection through to the CBD, that was part of the work that was presented to the council earlier, and the decision that AT and NZTA made about looking at those mass transit options.
My second question relates to safety. Safety features quite a bit in the feedback. Did any of that safety requirement look at grade separation of level crossings anywhere in the region?
Yes, through you, Madam Chair. We're looking at grade separation in the south. So if you can turn to the, I'll just flick through the map on the south there. So there's some areas around Takanini where we've identified the need to provide for grade separation around Waters Road and Taka Street, and looking at closing of 2 at-grade crossings through there. So that would grade separate 4 areas through there, 4 connections that currently have safety and also congestion issues for the public transport network and the road.
So that's 2 level crossing separations out of how many are there?
So overall we're looking at 4 through there, 2 to provide for crossings where the road would go above the rail, and 2 of the smaller local road connections where we need to look at closing the road at the rail there.
Out of how many level crossings?
Councillors, I can just add to that. So as part of ATAP is a $3 billion rail development package that addresses all the level rail crossings through Auckland, plus provides the 3rd and 4th lines between Westfield and then Papakura, and another line to Pukekohe. So ATAP, the big achievement for us at ATAP is we for the first time brought together all the costs. This is full disclosure for the first time ever. So in the ATAP package is we're addressing all the level rail crossings in Auckland.
But not the money.
Just how much of the $3
Yeah.
3
Just to
million
remember,
is allocated to level crossing grade separation?
so with TFUG, this is only related to new growth areas. So we could go round and round this, 90% ATAP, 10% TFUG. Sorry about all the acronyms, but this is only focused on the future, on transport that services future growth areas. So questions around the rest of the at-grade crossings and the changes around those. I think what I'm hearing from Ernst is that's an ATAP issue. So that should have been part of any discussions yesterday and with the ATAP discussions going forward. Any other questions, Councillor? No, we've got a big list here. Yeah, no, we've got a long. I'll just tell you we've got Marlene Brown, Leanne Ngamane, Councillor Penrose, Councillor Walker, Councillor Wood.
Councillor Webster.
And Councillor Webster. Mayor Brown.
Yeah, so, Madam Chair, I've got to go off and speak at the Somme commemorations shortly. So can I just briefly want to acknowledge those that have prepared this report, the work that's going on around here, recognise that it is within the overall ambit of what we're trying to achieve in our joined-upness around ATAP. I want to in particular draw to Ernst's attention because I think this is important. The joining up of the political will is not going to work unless there's an absolute joined up of the officers' will. So that's NZTA, MOT and AT in particular, as our primary advisors both on the policy side and also research in terms of what are the best outcomes. One of the key parts of informing how we should invest in transport solutions going forward and what a full integrated transport system looks like is that our officers, our advisors, the experts in the area not only take on board best practice globally, take on board the data and information that's informing their advice, but secondly also obviously consider the views of those who are the recipients of those advice, i.e. the mums and dads and people who live in the backyards there. And so in these new developing areas at this point, in a lot of those areas no one's there. But those who are there are giving you some quite clear leads. The one area where ATAP sort of both highlights where we've been and also where we need to go is the fact that we're still a bit roadsy and we're not focused enough yet in a full integrated transport system that includes a higher proportion of public transport investment. So to Ernst and the team, just look at those 3 bits of public feedback. And you'll find the 4th, which of course is Warkworth and those communities which has very little if no public transport at all. Of course they're focused on roads. But the rest of them are talking about busways and rail. Now, that is for me an important lead for how that joined up advice from our departmental heads and our officers comes into the ATAP planning process and the joined up planning process of Auckland and Auckland Council going forward. And so that sort of view from the community is one that has reflected the views that have come from me no matter where I was, except Warkworth, right around the whole city. And the most amazing transport meet that I had about 8 months ago was in Pukekohe. And Pukekohe, 5 years ago, if you went into Pukekohe, it'd all be about roads and not a single thing about public transport, and they would have laughed you out of the house if you had started talking bus or trains. The only thing they wanted to talk about was public transport. So times have changed, and we really need to reflect that in the sentiment, not just it's business as usual. A full integrated transport system is going to require by nature a much stronger focus on public transport and active transport. Now, I know you get that. I just want to address, Madam Chair, thank you for a little bit of latitude here, address the issue of the public in the new developing areas, not in the middle of town, but the new developing areas, their view on what they would see as being optimum for transport. Thanks, Madam Chair.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Good feedback. Less roady. Excellent. Member Ngamane.
Ngā mihi nui kia koutou. Looking, you have quite a thorough engagement process with Māori, and you have, and I'm sure in reading the report that's intended to continue in terms of the engagement. I'd be really keen, and I'm not sure whether that would be in future updates back to the Development Committee or perhaps direct to our Secretariat to actually know the outcomes of that engagement, kind of that end of it, to know what the issues are that are being raised and how they're being incorporated into the kind of final options that are being developed, and that could be done.
Yep, through you, Madam Chair, happy to progress that. We are continuing our huis with the iwi across the region, and through the first phase we developed a set of mana whenua values that we can incorporate into the scopes of the future investigations, and so we're continuing about how we can work best to actually deliver on that. So happy to provide progress on that.
That's great. So in terms of outcomes, what they're raising and how they're being responded to. Thank you.
Councillor Penrose.
Madam Chair, since I put my hand up, you pretty much nailed it before, but I just want to raise it at Audit and Risk on Monday. It was raised there that in regards to grade separation, and comments in regards to grade separation, that huge part to play there is Kiwi Rail. And whilst we continue to say AT, but the biggest factor here is Kiwi Rail. So I think that needs to be factored in, and the pressure needs to be applied. So.
Yep. Okay, no, good point. Thank you. Councillor Walker.
Sure. I'm just looking at the transport networks, particularly the north, and I'm familiar with most of the things that are here, like Penlink and the various upgrades, so I won't ask any questions on those, but there's a 9 here, new connection to Grand Drive. I'm not that familiar with that, and it's not, I can't see it as a 9. I'm assuming we're talking Grand Drive in Ariwa.
Yeah, through you, Madam Chair. It's the connection up through the new future urban area up.
So it's connecting to the other side of the motorway?
Yeah, okay. It's providing a connection of Wainui up through to Grand Drive and a connection through to Oriwa.
Okay, yep. So that's that. The other thing I note, and this goes to future growth, is light rail to the north. Has that been part of this process? Because obviously the busway is future-proof for light rail.
No.
At the current stage, what we're looking at is the identification of where that corridor could go from Albany through all the way up to Grand Drive, and looking at what would be the footprint to accommodate a number of different public transport modes as we work through with the other work that's happening, particularly around the city centre through to Albany, about what would be the future mode and what would the capacities need. So through here at this stage, we've identified the need for a corridor to connect all the way through up to Oriwa, with park and ride and stations at different points along that corridor, and ensuring that we've got a footprint that can accommodate a number of modes.
And is that also tying in with the second harbour crossing, particularly one that would be light rail based?
So yeah, that ties into the work that's happening there, because any future connection from the CBD would need to go through up to Oriwa or be able to provide for transitions on the way through to that. Yeah.
And the other question I've got, and again I don't see it shown here, and that's the Gulf Harbour ferry services, and particularly the Gulf Harbour ferry. I mean, next year we're going to see an increase from 12 sailings up to 30, and that makes a significant contribution to the transport network. So are those sorts of services, other than roads, part of your study? Because I know at a number of meetings the ferry services were raised, the light rail was raised, often.
Yep, through you, Madam Chair. The provision of how the future urban zones and the transport would connect into the existing network is certainly something that's been looked at. So how you could connect these areas to future residents in this area could connect into the ferry services has been looked at, and the changes to the ferry services are being looked at as part of that ATAP RLTP proposals. But one of the issues here is how to ensure that these future urban areas are connected to that, and that's some of the improvements that's shown through the green line here, which shows more of a public transport so that can link into the peninsula, and also through Penlink being able to provide for changes to the, the potential of the road network there to provide more road space for those PT services to connect into the ferry.
Okay, and my last question just goes to park and rides. Quite obviously, we've got existing park and rides, so Tiha, Silverdale, there's a new one proposed for Rosedale, there's a new one proposed with respect to Penlink, there's another possibility up in Wainui. Are those locations being identified as part of this process?
Through Madam Chair, yes, that's being identified to look at what's going to be the best for those future communities, and as we work through the subdivision plans for that, exactly where they're going to be and how they could fit into the residential areas and also the more commercial business areas. So we're working through what the footprints would be for that. That's one of the investigations that we'll need to go through in the next phase.
And I guess the other concern that I just put on the table is, I mean, so far the footprints have been woefully inadequate for the park and ride patronage, and I would suggest that we need to dramatically increase our footprints.
That's horizontal or vertical. Yep, exactly. We might be able to go up. Councillor Wood.
Yeah, thank you. I'm just interested in the northwest urban growth area. And my particular issue in relation to transport is ferry services, because in last term of council, the Mayor and the Prime Minister opened the new terminals at Beach Haven and Hobsonville, and we've now put feeder buses onto those two terminals, but the fares are astronomically high compared to what you pay to go from Beach Haven to the city. I mean, it's $3.10 now with a hop card, and it's $8 with a hop card, using your hop card on the ferry. So, or $7 from Beach Haven, $8 from Hobsonville. Yeah. Now, you know, it is a growth area, and I'm just disappointed at how many people actually use those ferries, because I would have thought, you know, in this day and age, that ferry services would be overflowing with passengers, but they aren't, and that happens at Bayswater as well. So, is it because Fuller's have got a monopoly and a stranglehold and on this with the government agencies, or is it? Well, yeah, I know, but we're opening. We're talking about a northwestern busway because people can't get to the city on public transport, but we have a feeder bus that goes from Westgate to the Hobsonville terminal, which we're paying for, and doesn't get the patronage that I would have thought it should get, and the bus and the ferry services from Hobsonville to the city aren't brimming, and they haven't had to put bigger ferries on. So there's some fundamental issue there that I think needs to be looked at, because, as Councillor Darby said, Hobsonville is the leading kind of new area that we've developed, but we haven't been able to crack it as far as those ferries are concerned. So I'd like an explanation as to what we are going to do in the future.
So that it's slightly out of scope, Councillor Wood, but I just wonder perhaps from yeah, it is, but I'm just saying the actual discussion about the cost of ferries and that sort of thing, I think is probably getting a bit detaily. I just wondered if any comment from Auckland Transport, Councillor Fletcher?
Well, I think what we need to observe as a principle, the direction that we're taking to look at 50% subsidies. You know, we've seen the change from 60% to 50% for rail, and we're going to have to arrive at some point where there is an agreed level of subsidy. It is incredibly expensive to get these ferry services off the ground, and I think everyone around this table would like to see more, given our harbour status and the opportunity that we have for really moving people more readily. But until we can actually come to grips with this whole issue of subsidy, And it might be helpful perhaps if our officer could actually comment on that, because there's been a lot of submissions on this very issue. And I know the board is very keen that we can develop it, but it comes down to the raw dollars.
Through you, Madam Chair, and that's certainly something that we're looking for in the plan here, where we're building on some of those connections to provide better public transport links and park and ride down to the ferry terminals of West Harbour and looking at Hobsonville as well, and to provide the opportunity for more patronage to make it a shorter journey and a more connected journey for those future residents, and that will go some way to looking at the subsidy levels and being able to work through that. So it is in the plan, and we're working through that in the next stages to see what is the split between the bus and the ferry process.
But I think it's good, thank you, Councillor Fletcher. It's just reminding us part of it is our discussion on subsidy.
On
you
the
know,
principles
and
that will
exactly.
underpin it.
Yep. Okay. Councillor Webster.
Yes, thank you for this, and can I thank the staff too for those drop-in sessions all over Auckland. That was really good and well attended in some areas. My question is, there's a couple of questions. The Western Collector in Warkworth, the proposal at the moment is to, on the map it shows a new road, but I believe the proposal at the moment is to do up Hudson Road. And my question is, why would you put money into doing up a road like Hudson Road, which has masons, contractors, roads for roads, all those sorts of heavy industrial on it, rather than just do the road behind it, which is supposed to meet with Highway 1? That's one question. The other one is, you have the Western Collector coming off McKinney Road, which I know was the plan years ago. Why would you not have it coming off as a slip road on Highway 1? Because if you come off McKinney Road, that means there's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 sets of traffic lights in probably about 3 k's. And my last question, Madam Chair, is with the RONs, are we building the busway as part of that, or is it going to be as separate? Because if they're going to be building a Puhoi to Warkworth RONs, would you not want to put a busway or a bus lane on that at that construction?
Okay, through you, Madam Chair. In terms of the Western Collector Road, you're correct that the alignment that we've got for the Western Collector Road is a new road that connects in with the Matakana link road, so it is being provided there. As Warkworth develops, there might be a need to look at and examine what's required on Hudson Road as well, but in terms of the Western Collector, it is being identified as a new corridor to connect in with the Matakana link road in the north.
So can I just ask you, because that's interesting, because I was at a meeting last night and on Monday where they were talking about doing up Hudson Road rather than do that new road, which seems a waste of money.
Okay.
So maybe someone can get back to me on that detail.
Yep, happy to progress that conversation. In terms of the southern area, you're right, this plan does show the work that we went out to consultation still had a link in opposite McKinney. Through the next round of investigations, we've got to identify exactly where that connection could be. So while it's shown as indicative here, we've got to work through the detail of that. There's quite a number of developments going on in that southern part of Warkworth, and we've got to align with those as well and work with those landowners.
Yeah. No, it's ridiculous.
In terms of the public transport question, we have identified here a park and ride facility at the connection between the existing State Highway 1 and the new RONs, and we're working on providing a bus service utilising the existing motorway, not identified in a separate corridor.
Just seems, I mean, if we're trying to future-proof for public transport, and I know it didn't figure high, but I get asked all the time about public transport, and as you know, there's already a private bus that comes down to Auckland now. There's 2 a day, and they're full. It just seems to me if we're building a motorway, we should be future-proofing it with a bus lane.
Okay, I'll look at that. I definitely know we're looking at 30-minute services in the future from Walkworth to the south.
Thank you, Councillor. Councillor Cashmore.
Oh, thank you. No matter what the mode, whether it's combined or it's multi or separate or whatever, one of the criticisms we've been getting is time. So some of these projects have already had a business case put to them. It might be a little bit historic, but there has been business cases for Penlink, for extension of electrification, etc. Looking forward, what sort of timeframes are we about delivering confirmed projects, budgeted or not? And are we going to be able to avoid paralysis by ongoing analysis with just using some of the existing data that we already have?
Pretty well, I've got 3/4.
Through you, Madam Chair, certainly ATAP has given us that priority in the first decade of a number of initiatives through here, and we're working urgently on those priorities, particularly around the release of new housing areas, so tying in with the proposals for the Housing Infrastructure Fund bid as well. So we've certainly got a number of areas, particularly around the Whenuapai, the Red Hills, the Takanini areas and the Pukekohe Pairata areas where the live zoning has come through the unitary plan, that we need to make immediate action on that. So that's what we're working on at the moment.
Madam Chair, the point is, I think, and touched on it, is that the connectivity between where consenting what's happening now with stuff being live zoned, the amount of dirt that's going to be shifted, starting very soon, with our lag time for actually provision of the infrastructure required, there is going to be a gap. So the issues we have are probably potentially going to get worse. And are we happy that the work program is going to deliver things quickly enough and in the most effective timeline? I guess I'm looking pretty hard at those 2 gentlemen to your left. But.
Do you want to make a comment on the timing?
Sorry, you caught me. Look, I think there's no doubt that we all agree that the gaps are there financially. So I think the common resolve to resolve those and continue with the work that ATAP and Transport for Future Urban Growth have done. And I think the very question you've asked about it, how we don't get paralysed by analysis and just get on with it. So I think you heard from Ernst earlier the resolve from NZTA, which we're seeing in real life in every working group we're in. I think NZTA, MOT, Treasury and ourselves, and you know well from the work you've done through the Auckland Transport Alignment, if we continue the spirit of that and the speed of that, then I think we'll mitigate your concern. And I think we've just got to call each other out if we're allowing ourselves at whatever layer to let this grind to a halt, because we'll pay for it for a long time.
Do we understand the level of capacity within the industry to deliver?
I think we understand it more real every day, and we all know there's a lot going on in terms of skill development, labour shortage work and things everywhere. We also know there's no pixie dust, so I think we just have to long march, hard yards, and grind it out.
But one of the points I'd make, Madam Chair, is that certainty, financial certainty for the construction industry is a crucial part of this. I mean, one of the problems we've potentially had in New Zealand is that we have one-off projects and there's gaps and there's still payments to be made on very, very expensive toys. So we need a big, long, I guess, project, multi-faceted program that gives the industry certainty from council and from Crown joined up. It's going to be a long-term delivery and attract JVs with some overseas companies with New Zealand or expansion within our existing companies. And to me, that's going to be an absolute critical point we're going to have to really push hard for next term, to have these joined up deliveries stretching out in 10-year or more chunks.
And I think the success I'm seeing at the moment is the join uppness of the agencies, and I think also that's true right through to procurement in terms of us all having a clear view on how to do that well. The industry's responding to that, I think, is part of your concern as well, and we've got to make it easy for them to do that as much as we possibly can while managing risk.
Yeah. And that,
Madam
yeah.
Chair, if I may
Ernst?
just add to that. Councillor, this work is addressing part of your concern, where this is developed as one program. So for the first time, we actually have a nearly $8 billion, and we've approached it as one business case to really short-circuit that. So previously there was a project and another project. Now we have a program. And as Jim said, we're now looking at joint procurement of that. Can we procure that different and faster and actually bundle the projects up together? Whether it's NZTA funded or otherwise, just bundle it up together. Because if we don't do, as Jim suggests, we will not meet the demand. You're quite right.
Yep, I've got you, Councillor Lee. Councillor Lee?
Thank you. Just to get back to, I think the whole point of this paper is the public feedback. We had ATAP, the official view, which we dealt with in secret yesterday, but this is really the public, what the public aspires to. And as the Mayor said, the public is obviously very interested nowadays in public transport. But just a couple of questions. Thanks for the report, and there's a lot of graphics here. And as Confucius is reputed to have said, a picture is worth 1,000 words. But we can see from the first histogram how the response from North West, how significant that was. But I'm a little bit curious because it's divided into public and business. And when you try and relate the categories of public to business, you go to regional and you look across, you see golf, or you see North Warkworth and you've got Rodney West or Rodney North. And so therefore, that's not very legible. I'd have to make that point. But just coming on, feedback. This is very important in a democratic body. The people who are paying for all this stuff, what they want. And quite often the public can be right and the officials can be wrong. But in terms of public feedback and the numbers of public providing response, I'm significantly higher than a category called business. But I'm sure everyone who is in business is a member of the public too. It's got a family and pays rates and all the rest of it. So I'm not sure about the division here. However, you've got a 35% support for improved rail infrastructure, or services indeed, to Kumeu Huapai. I think the infrastructure is actually there, equating to 14%, was it 16% from the green business side of things. So in terms of graphics, it's misleading. I would note, albeit, the very high response from business also for rail services. Just moving on. So if you're going to take this report forward, I think it needs to be a little bit more legible because it's a wee bit visually misleading. We're coming down to south, and I note how important rail to airport is to business. I don't know how that equates to what public are saying. They're talking about prioritise and expand rail or provide faster rail connections, but there's not that connection or joined upness, as the jargon is, relating to these graphs to give decision makers like us a clear idea. But I think we get the drift. And the importance of public transport and the importance of rail, and in the highest responding area, the importance of getting that track, which is sitting there empty, being used by our surplus diesel rolling stock to get that, to take the pressure off the roads. This is what the public want and business wants, and I don't believe Auckland Transport is responding, and I think it needs to respond, and I think in the new term, I think the new council will need to send a rocket over to that CCO to get rail services back and moving to Huapai, as was planned up until 2013. I've got to go to another function. Thank you, Madam Chair.
It didn't work out there, Mike.
There wasn't a question. So, shall we move
Pardon?
on?
Who said what?
Councillor, Councillor
Sorry?
Darby. Councillor Darby?
I've got to go.
Madam Chair, I just pick up on the points the Mayor made and Councillor Lee, and I think they're valid, made differently, but they are really picking up on the feedback here. I think it's remarkable. We saw the first tranche of feedback saying, you know, it was a chorus, and it was right across Auckland with a little bit less in Warkworth, where there is a feeling of, you know, car dependency. They don't have a rail line coming near them, and they don't have a busway coming near them, and so there's a future that is a bit more auto-dependent there, and Councillor Webster's reminding us that we need to address that in the future proofing of the road infrastructure. And I think absolutely correct. I think we all get that. And so I'm pretty conversant with this, and I'm thanking the staff. I'm just wondering, before Councillor Lee departs, whether there's a willingness to explore what the Mayor said and what Councillor Lee says, and I think what many of us are saying, is in the next stage, the staff are going to be, this is not concluded yet, it's iterative and there's further work to do, and you can just see the feedback here, and we've seen it in our annual plan, well actually our 10-year plan, annual plan, it's just heightened. The public is saying, bring more of this, please. It's not exclusive. This is not being zealous about it.
No.
That is just saying, bring us more of this. So the red, I think, belongs to all of us. It's bring us more of this in the final documentation.
And let's be clear about it. I think those graphs are quite misleading, and I hope that's not deliberate. But there's a strong, public views that need to be reflected accurately.
Okay, Councillor, you've done well up to now.
I didn't appreciate the comment from one of the managers, and I'll talk to them later about that.
Can I move? Sorry.
Just hang on. Can we just shush for a minute, Councillor? It's not okay to just drop a criticism like that and then leave. I think we will just strike it from whatever records. Councillor Darby, you're happy to move. I'm happy to second. I think those are wise words to add. Any further discussion on that? I will put that. All those in favour, please say aye. Aye. Against, carried. Can I thank our team for the clear, concise and very legible presentation that they've given to us?
I may have misdirected that comment. It may have come from some... I fulsomely apologise.
No, that's cool.
That's accepted and appreciated. Thank you.
And Madam Chair, could I get you to note, whether it needs to be formally or otherwise, the work that Auckland Transport is doing between Papakura and Pukekohe to try and come up with some solution to the electrification is the very same work that will apply to the areas that are being articulated by others. So I would hate there to be a thought or suggestion in this chamber that work is not being explored. That work is being done as we speak. So we just need to be mindful that opportunities are there for the future already.
Yeah, and I'd like to endorse that because I think there is a bit of grey between all the ongoing work that's occurring and these programs of work, and the Transport Urban Growth team are very aware of that ongoing work and are assuming that will continue. So I agree with you. I think it's difficult when we only talk about one piece. It is all rolled in there, and we're aware of the south work that will be available for the northwest once the south is electrified.
And may I also, and it might be, and I'm not intending in any way to make things controversial, but with the decision to go with the EMUs, it enabled us to have, and we made a big investment in servicing, and the cost of delivery of these services has been extraordinary. So whilst it's kind of on paper, it seems fantastic to just keep them as diesel units on those lines, we've geared ourselves up for an electric and probably better environmental future. So that is why this work that Auckland Transport is doing on actually enabling electrification on routes that have previously been diesel is really important, but it is perhaps a little bit deceptive when you look at the continuation of diesel services on those routes.
Oh, no, not this one.
Madam Chair, Madam Chair,
Yes, councillor
I
Wood.
just want to qualify the comments that were made in relation to ferries. I mean, Councillor Fletcher talks about trains, but ferries don't have, it said, the capital cost of a ferry is a lot of money to buy a ferry, but don't have the capital cost of the infrastructure to run on. We've got the harbour, and it's a great way of getting people around. 5.5 million people use the ferries at the moment, which is, a appreciable number, but it could be doubled or trebled very quickly, I believe, if we had decent ferry services at decent prices.
Okay.
So,
We hear you, councillor Wood. Point well made. Also, we need, of course, the infrastructure for the ferries to dock at. Okay, I'm going to put that recommendation. It's been moved and seconded. All those in favour, please say aye. Yes, carried. Good, we're done. So we move now on to. Okay, all right. Thank you, team. Appreciate the excellent work. So we'll move on to the Whenuapai structure plan. Warren and Erin. And thank you, councillor Watson's already signalled he's happy to move that.
Happy to
Councillor
second.
Walker, you're happy to second. Marvellous. So we might, we might just take it as read and take questions or briefly go through. Why don't we just briefly get people up to date, make sure everyone's comfortable with what's being proposed. It has moved apace. So, Warren.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Morena, good morning, everybody. We're really here to present to you the final structure plan, and you'll see from the recommendations that are in front of you, it's been, I guess, and it's a bit like the TFUG before you, but probably more collaborative because it has involved a lot more across the organisation, departments and CCOs. And from my point of view, it's been a really great thing as a staff member to lead that collaboration across the organisation. And I guess for the Whenuapai structure plan, there are two key aspects to it. The first is that this is the first structure plan done under the requirements of the Auckland Unitary Plan. So from that point of view, it's a model for the future, and as I say, I think it's been a model in terms of collaborative behaviour. What it will mean, though, if it is seen as a good quality structure plan, then that will be the level that when private plan changes come in to change or to urbanise the future urban zones around Auckland, they will have to measure up to that level. And we've been conscious of that, I guess, as an innovative benchmark that we have to work to. So that's the first point. And the second point is that this is a large area. This is 1,200 hectares in Auckland, and it's at a pivotal point between two key state highways, and with a significant and fragile upper harbour coastline to it. So through the planning, we've really taken note of those boundaries, and so you'll see on that map in front of you, and we've only really got two maps to show you. One is the structure plan map, which you see there, and the other one is the staging that we are suggesting. And in a moment, I'll get Erin to talk through some of those. But I would also, so I'd like to in particular thank the political working group who have been great in terms of giving us feedback along the way, and also working in a very collaborative way through some difficult times, I think. I'd also like to make mention of the management team who we reported to who always made sure we were keeping to time, who always made sure we were on a budget, and also it meant that the CCOs really bought in particular the CCOs brought in to the process we were working on. So if I can just briefly talk about the resolutions there. First of all, that you approve the structure plan. There will be some minor changes along the way, just in terms of editing. There's still a couple of maps which need to be entirely finalised. But I did want to talk about the future in terms of this isn't the end. This means that for the next steps, we go out and we give the submitters copies of our final report. We hold a meeting with landowners and the residents in the area to let them know what's happening and when, because we know that in this area there are not many people living there at the moment, and in accordance with this structure plan, in 10 years we could have over 20,000 people living there, and so that change has to be managed. And I think for us, we see ourselves here in the long term helping some of that change happen and forming those relationships. So we will be talking to stakeholders, we will be talking to iwi as we go through this, we will be talking to the general public at large. We will start a plan change as soon as we can after this meeting, and we hope to try and make, again, the plan change a bit of a model to try and ensure we have our CCOs with us in terms of designating land for pump stations, land for roads, and so on. So we really, particularly the arterial, so we really want to try and create that one-stop shop for a plan change, so that people who make submissions won't have to go through the same process through designations and so on as well in the future. But that also puts some challenges to the council, I think, because we will have to think about the land that we as council need to acquire for the future community facilities that we need to plan for. However, that's for another day, but it will be a set of decisions that will be coming up in the future. And at the time that we do a structure, as we prepare the draft plan change, we will bring it back to the council for approval before it goes out. But it's intended that we base it on this structure plan and the rules around the unitary plan.
Okay. Councillor Watson.
Just a couple of very brief comments, and firstly that's to compliment Warren and Erin and the team for an outstanding job. Certainly in terms of the way the community was engaged with, they responded really well, and our staff really went out of their way to capture people's views and make them feel as if they were actually getting taken on board. Very significant piece of work, as we've just heard there, in terms of scale, 1,200 hectares, 10,000 dwellings, 20,000 people, 7,000 jobs. This is quite big time in a very sensitive environment with a defence force base right in the middle of it. So a number of different threads to be pulled together there. I'm glad also that the structure plan identifies some of the constraints. That's important certainly for the local community in terms of transport infrastructure and the environment, and the staging plan that has been put out. So there's a degree of certainty as to what's going to happen, and in terms of council providing the services, there's a degree of financial sense attached to that. So I think, without really labouring the point, that this has been a very good model for the future, for future structure plans, and the people that were involved in it expedited the process, but in expediting it didn't shortcut the involvement of the community. So as a result, I think we've got a good plan here for a very pivotal area, and one which will be largely central to a lot of growth in both a number of wards. So thanks, guys.
Thank you. Thanks, Councillor Watson. Well said. Councillor Walker.
Sure. Just got a question around the open space. Page. Open space is covered on page 86. It's also mentioned on page 85, and it's also mentioned on page 77. Public engagement. It's, you know, there are various comments, and I see that there's approximately 26 hectares of additional open space required to meet the recreational needs. What sort of percentage are we looking at of open space as a proportion of the overall development, excluding the airbase, if we take that out?
Through the chair, if I may answer that, we have had our open space staff apply the network criteria for open space throughout this area, and on the map councillors will see the green dots which identify potential future areas for open space, including potentially a large urban park and a sports fields complex. I'm not sure about the exact percentage of land excuse me, that is open space. However, it will be acquired as subdivision unfolds across the area, other than the large urban parks.
Sure. I mean, the reason that I raise this, and I keep repeating it, is our contributions for park space are woefully inadequate. Woefully inadequate. And when I look at this plan for a huge area, just in terms of the amount of green space relative to the number of people living there, certainly compared to what Aucklanders have been used to elsewhere, is maybe it's 15% of what Aucklanders have been comfortable with, or 10% to date, and this is the model going forward. So I just want to highlight that certainly on my part, going forward, Aucklanders are going to be having far, far less open space to recreate, to walk, to enjoy everything. And certainly if we're not acquiring land early in the process, before we purchase it at developed price, we're not going to be able to afford to get much. And certainly prices in this area in Whenuapai, because of speculation, are already rocketing. So I just put to council, if we're going to actually acquire enough reserve space here, we need to do it, and we need to do it early. Otherwise, it's game over.
Okay, I'll take a comment, and then I just want to invite Lisa to join us.
Through the chair. Yeah, thank you. Sorry. We're also, what is not easy to see on that particular map is that we are taking esplanade reserves around the coast as subdivision. Sure. Yep. Which isn't apparent there. We're likely to acquire some of the larger parks, and I understand that our parks people will be bringing the budgets associated with that forward in the next annual plan and also through the next LTP. So that matter is definitely being worked on as we speak.
Good. That's great. Yeah. And I think that's the key thing to remember, is that we are doing exactly what Councillor Walker's asking for.
Just through you, Madam Chair, just one point. It would be useful to have a big picture percentage along the lines that I suggested, so that we have a percentage and we can compare that with the historical percentage, which was 7.5%.
Okay. Yes, I seem to remember we covered some of that in the meetings that we had, but we can make that available to you, Councillor Walker. Now, Chairperson White.
Thank you. I just wanted to say thank you to the team, because I echo what John said, and the feedback from the community and the stakeholders in Whenuapai has been really positive. The volume of submissions hasn't been high, but the level of engagement has been, and so the team have worked really hard on that. My apologies for a couple of those early morning workshops. The logistics were bit tricky. But I have been following all of the paperwork, and I really appreciate being kept in the loop, even though I wasn't able to physically attend a couple of the meetings. Our community is facing massive growth, and so the concerns that have been raised around the open space network planning are really important. The LTP refresh next year is going to be an absolutely vital piece of work, as will be local board plans and things. So it's just working in partnership and making sure that we're making informed decisions, all of us, on facts and not emotions, and that going forward we should get better outcomes. Certainty around timing. The only thing I'm hearing from the community is the concern around the extension of the SHA legislation and how that could potentially just throw out some of our planning ability. So I think we know how hard it is to do an LTP with variables like special housing legislation, just a little bit tricky, but if we keep communicating, we'll keep our community on side. The airbase is, we had a dinner there on Tuesday, and the base commander was outlining all the work that they're doing, and again, it's really important to have communication in both directions, because one of our intensification areas is going to have a firing range on the boundary. So just little issues like that, and just informing people moving in will be really key. But thank you guys, you've done an amazing job, and that's good for us because we get the complaints if you don't, so thank you.
Yeah, thank you. And just, I guess, because the SHA legislation has been raised, just to settle any concerns people have got, we're making it clear to the Minister, and it certainly is in that this Auckland will not be accepting new SHAs. This is simply a piece of legislation that will be utilised in Auckland to allow the last remaining, possibly one SHA to be finalised. Most of the others should be safely across the line, and we don't need any new SHAs because we've got the unitary plan. So just we need to put that message out there. Yep. No more SHAs, thank you, don't bother asking. Okay, Councillor Casey.
I had a question to anybody just about the airbase. We had a really good visit out there some time ago. It's with regard to the parcels of land that they own outside of the base. I can see on this map there's some property just at the entrance, but I can't see it's got a white code here for NZDF parcels, but I can't find any parcels.
Yeah, through the chair, it's an unusual circumstance where on the map, the dark grey area is the airbase, and then also this smaller square where the aerials are kept. And that is the land that is designated for airbase activities, including the runway lights at either end. But then the Ministry of Defence owns some land outside of the designation for housing, and so some of their personnel are housed there. And so we have made the decision to include that as part of the Whenuapai structure plan, because the Defence Force have categorically said that the defence base is not part of the structure plan, because they do not wish to imply that it might be used for residential purposes. However, we continue to talk to them about their Defence Force housing that is outside of the designated base, and we'll engage with them before the plan change about how exactly they want that zoned. I'm not sure if that answers your question.
No, it doesn't. My question was, where is that land?
Oh, okay.
There's a code for it, but I can't find it on the map.
Erin, point that side because
sorry,
you can't
it's
see that.
it's this cross-hatched area here. So some land down adjacent to Pine Pack Mill, which is we've identified as mixed medium density. So, sorry, the map is a little bit small.
So how many parcels of land are there outside of the base?
Pardon?
How many parcels of New Zealand Defence Force land are there outside of the base?
I couldn't tell you that. Maybe a dozen.
So you're in negotiation with them about how that's going to be?
Yes.
Well, discussion. Yes.
Yes, discussion.
They own the land. Yes.
Yeah. Yeah. Is there a chance that they can divest that land?
I think that the more we talk to them, the more they start to think of other possibilities. Yes.
So that's a yes.
Well, there's always a chance. Yes. I mean, I wouldn't like to overplay that.
Through the chair, I could add that when we were on base with the base commander and his staff, they were talking about the fact that one of the difficulties they're having is housing their staff, and that staff are now having to enter the private market for accommodation. So I think most of that housing is actually full of staff, and so they were saying they've got the other issue of too many people working at the base who want to live in close proximity, but there isn't room for them. Yeah.
Okay, thanks, Councillor Casey. Any other questions before we put the recommendation?
Well, there's one.
Yeah.
For the first 3 or 4 years, the new residents will have to travel to Westgate for swimming and recreation because there's nothing locally. There's the local hall. So do you see that? When do you see a local facility that would provide local recreation and swimming?
Through the chair, the open space and also the community facilities have been looked at in a much wider context than Whenuapai, and so there are facilities at Westgate and
but that's a 4K drive. You can't walk to Westgate.
Yeah, that's true. And so over time and over the life of the structure plan, which is the next 20 years, those community facilities will be developed. There currently isn't a population to support those facilities, and our community facilities people have been looking at that and identified the likelihood of some type of facility in what will be called Whenuapai Centre, not Whenuapai Village. Where exactly that is and when that is operational, I'm not sure.
And I like the idea of a satellite library in the interim, which is great. Libraries are always onto it.
Just a point, we've got one community facility already open and run by council at Hobsonville Point now, the building next door, the headquarters building. We're in the process of the detailed design, so that'll be coming on stream in the next year. We've got sports fields being developed at Scott Point that will be open for use in 3 years. That's going to serve the wider catchment. Just a point about Upper Harbour generally, we don't have many communities that have community facilities within a 4K walk. Like it's a big geographic area. It's not the norm to have walk-up facilities. Most of our people drive perhaps 12Ks to go to the library. That's if they're close. So it's different. Urban is different than greenfields, and what we're used to is not what's happening going forward because we can't afford that level of service, quite frankly. Yeah. So there isn't an expectation by us that everyone has everything within walking distance.
That's a really good way of putting it, Lisa. I think for people in Whenuapai and having, this was for Linda Cooper and I, this was our old area. For the people of Whenuapai, the Westgate Centre is just up the road, so it feels very, very close. It is very rural, and for them now to be able to go just over the road to Hobsonville is even closer. So, whilst we are looking very, very closely at the pool for Massey, and I hope in the next term everyone's going to be behind the pool up in Massey, the unfolding of community facilities in that area will happen.
But as a network, not as a board by board. Sorry.
Exactly.
On needs-based evidence, as will be
we need one and walk with.
Okay. Any other questions or comments? Right, Councillor Walker, and then and Member Wilcox, and then I think we'll put the recommendation.
Just looking at how we deal with things going forward, and I'll just cast my mind to a couple of other areas. Up at Millwater, in Silverdale and also Hobsonville, we've had the advantage that we've been dealing with very large landowners. So the consequences, it's been a lot easier to negotiate deals over a whole range of things. They go to transport, they go to open space, they go to a range of things. Certainly as far as Millwater is concerned, under the Rodney District Council, there were very generous areas of reserve, a lot of advanced planning. Whenuapai is a little different. If we take out the airbase, my understanding is that the ownership is very very fractured. So how are we going to get on in terms of negotiations, pulling people together, in terms of collaboration, to make a lot of things happen?
I think, through you, Madam Chair, there's no doubt that it's more difficult when there are multiple owners. And I will say, I guess, through the course of doing this structure plan, land holdings have changed ownership already along the way, and as we go through the plan change process, it will as well. And there are various landowners who have got together, and we have had, I think, 3 meetings now with landowners and developers, and have talked about how we might encourage them to get together. And I think some of that work will be, while we may be able to assist in some of that, some of the work that's being done within the DPO and Panuku are areas where project management can happen. And at the last meeting with developers, we talked about just exactly some of those costs, and how, as a whole, we needed to see how we were creating this new community. And we talked about the difference between an SHA being a residential development, primarily, and a structure plan trying to create a community and all the things that went with it. So it's going to be more challenging than it was at Millwater. It was, in retrospect, so I didn't feel it at the time, but in retrospect it felt easy to sign those 11 developer agreements that we did. But I think we'll be able to use the resources of the council to bring a lot of that together and to try and design, which we have been, excuse me, design some of the stages so that the infrastructure will, the development of the infrastructure will really encourage people to work together. No doubt we will have landowners who want to stand aside, and even working with single developers, you find there's one on the edge. But I think we're pretty conscious of how we implement this, and the challenge that's ahead for the council and for the developers to work on that.
So within the planning office, have we got some people, some specific people that are dedicated to a coordinated exercise going forward in terms of point of contact, pulling everything together?
Can I comment on that, Madam Chair? Warren is the person who probably brought most of Millwater together. So for a former Rodney District Councillor to ask if we've got anyone of Warren is a bit, I think, strange. Warren,
Madam
you've done
Chair,
a great job.
I wasn't asking Councillor Webster.
And you did a great job in Millwater.
Through you, Madam Chair.
And through me, the answer is yes, we do have them. We've got Warren. So we're going to move on to Member Wilcox.
Yeah, I think enough corridors been had. I'd just like to say thank you. It was a great experience going out to Whenuapai, talking to all the people and getting their comments, and also talking to whānau afterwards, you know, when I went out there and spoke to the marae at Piringatai and Rewiti. They were most appreciative, so thank you so much.
Excellent. So I think we'll put that, and at the same time warmly thank Erin Shields and Warren McLennan for a job well done, and the team that's backed them. So I'll put that. All those in favour, please say aye.
Aye.
Against, carried. Thank you. Excellent work, team. So our final item is, and it wouldn't be a meeting of this committee if there wasn't something from the Productivity Commission to be dealing with, and
It's a good way to finish, Madam Chair.
Yep, it is. Welcome to our Prodcom team who worked through the huge piece of information that came to us from the Productivity Commission, the size of a very large old-fashioned telephone book, that's been reduced down to a very sensible submission. We've workshopped this, we've discussed it, so I think we've got a very brief presentation, and then we'll take some questions, and hopefully that will be it. Thank you.
Thank you. So the approach that we thought we'd take this morning was just to briefly cover the background to the inquiry, the overarching themes in our proposed submission, and the next steps to give you the context for the inquiry. So just in terms of the purpose and the scope of the inquiry, just a reminder, it's a blue skies inquiry, review of the urban planning system. The Productivity Commission have been given 2 clear instructions in terms of what's expected to be covered in their final report. They're expected to identify criteria for assessing current and future reform, and they're also expected to produce a number of alternative models for a future urban planning system. The instructing ministers have given quite clear guidance that they are expecting the Commission to consider the governance, funding and delivery mechanisms similar to those already enabled by the current suite of Resource Management Act, Land Transport Management Act and Local Government Act. They've also been very clear in terms of what is out of scope of the inquiry, so an assessment of the previous or current reforms around the urban planning system or legislation is quite clearly scoped out of this inquiry. So the wider context in terms of the inquiry, this inquiry comes on the back of the Using Land for Housing inquiry of last year. It also comes on the back of government's response a couple of weeks ago to that Using Land for Housing inquiry, and also the earlier 2011 Housing Affordability inquiry. So there's a relatively consistent theme through those inquiries. The wider context is there's also a number of fairly significant urban planning reforms underway, including the RMA reform and the work being done under the Better Local Services Bill. There's also the reform that it has been signalled by the government's response to the Using Land for Housing inquiry, the previous Commission inquiry.
Thanks, Jen. So this slide just summarises some of the overarching themes that were developed after we had our Auckland Development Committee workshop on the 30th of August. So just those overarching things listed there, the first being that Council values the wider contribution of planning to a range of goals for community outcomes. The Commission lists their rationale for planning, if you like, and they state sort of 3 points: regulating negative spillovers from land use, providing and funding local public goods, and providing and managing essential infrastructure services. So we're just, from a council's point of view, broadening that scope. The second point there being that we, in our draft submission, reiterating the principles that we made in our response to the issues paper, those 3 principles being planning as a system, planning for future funding challenges, and robust decision making and strong public engagement. The Commission identified as its principles for designing an urban planning framework: flexibility and responsiveness, which was largely expressed as the ability to change land use easily, the provision of development capacity to meet demand, mobility of residents and goods to and through the city, and the ability to fit land use activities within a clearly defined biophysical envelope. The next of those broad themes was the concerns that Jen's just mentioned here about the broader ongoing reform program within central government and how the recommendations within the Commission's draft report might be taken as a cohesive whole, and we think that there are some issues there around significant change. We also make the point in the draft submission that the unitary plan has enabled considerable and significant development capacity. We're also making the point in the draft submission that the focus now for Council, in light of the unitary plan progress, our focus now shifts to the significant challenges for funding and delivering infrastructure. And the final theme there in our draft submission is that there are impacts of recommendations the Productivity Commission makes that are unexamined for Māori.
Madam Chair, I'm prepared to move the
Are you
recommendation.
happy to move?
Yeah, I think it's a good synopsis of what was discussed at the workshop.
Oh.
And I don't think we need to go into it really in any depth. I think what's been put down there is well done.
Okay, shall we just cover next steps and then we'll get into that?
Thank you. So the submissions for this inquiry close on the 3rd of October. In terms of the final report due from the Productivity Commission, they'll be tabling that with Cabinet on the 30th of November, and then we'll be waiting for government decisions on what the resulting work program will look like.
Thank you. Jennifer and Toby, thank you. I think you've done a superb job on this, as Councillor Wood says. So Councillor Wood will move. I'm happy to second, and it will be in the hands of the next council how they treat this.
I just want to speak and also thank the officers for the work that they have done. I think they were very detailed in their in what they gave us at the workshop, and I think that was very helpful. And they certainly have taken on board the responses and the comments, and I think that's well reflected in the document. So thank you very much. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Wood. I think we might actually add that as a third recommendation, because the ongoing work that's been done to react to the Productivity Commission submissions, I think, should be acknowledged, because it's often in a very short time frame with a huge degree of complexity, and I think we are well served by our team who has worked this through. So we'll add an acknowledgement for the work done on this. Any questions? Councillor Casey.
2 questions. Is there any fronting this? Are we fronting it verbally?
We haven't planned to do that at this stage, no.
I think we should. I think we should send our best gun, George. I think we should, yeah.
I think we should, but we will, we may...
It's the 3rd of October, George, you'll still be here.
No, it closes
No,
on the 3rd
it closes on the 3rd.
I don't think it works like that.
Oh,
with
I
the
see.
productivity
Can you just explain then when we'd get the opportunity to speak to it? Because I think we should.
So the Productivity Commission are open to engagement. My understanding is right up until the submissions close, but it may be that we can have some conversations with them around that as well.
Madam Chair, I'd say that this is a matter where the officers have got the in-depth knowledge and understanding.
Oh, no. This is a real political grab for power, George, and it should be fronted by the politicians. Absolutely.
If we're dealing with the Productivity Commission at this stage, it's not the politicians that we're talking to.
It's a politician's, well, as a politician, through the
Hang on,
chair,
through-
I'm objecting to the power grab by the government through this.
Yeah. Councillor Casey, I agree with you, and I think the timing is unfortunate because it does straddle 2 councils, but I think if there is an opportunity to be heard by, if they are doing formal hearings, and we have had opportunities previously, I think, to be heard in relation to this, particularly the one that causes some of us the most concern, which is on page 16, that the trigger mechanism. I think we do need to be prepared to speak quite strongly about some of our concerns in here. So I don't think we can finalise it because we are between 2 councils, but I think we need to note that we would like to find an opportunity to speak directly to this if possible.
Could we do a D to that effect? That we recommend the new council makes a submission, a verbal submission, whatever the words are.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yep, we can do
I
that.
can follow that up with the Commission for you.
Yeah, good idea. So we'll make that a D. So I'll put that recommendation. All those in favour, please say aye.
Aye.
Against, carried. And just before I close, I would like to, and this is a perfect chance to do it while we've been acknowledging our staff on this issue, I want to acknowledge the staff who have worked with this committee over the last 6 years in particular, and in the last 3 years as we've done a lot of extraordinarily hard work. I think we have been amazingly well served. I'm amazed constantly by the clarity of thought and the quality of information we receive. It's not always agreed with and it's not always accepted, but we can't fault the quality of information that comes our way. What we do with it is then up to us as politicians. But I'd like to thank Dean and Jim, and I particularly want to warmly thank the extraordinary Tam and Catherine for their attention to detail and their constant support and ensuring that everything runs smoothly. I think they are fantastic, and I'd like us to give them a round of applause. Thank you. And finally, acknowledging our IMSB partners around the table for this committee. Thank you for the partnership. Thank you for the huge amount of work. Thank you for holding the quorum on many occasions, and thank you for participating in workshops, in smaller groups that get the work done, and for always being here, and for that we acknowledge you. Now, apparently there is going to be lunch for the committee downstairs from 12:30. Can we make it
Cancel it.
12? I think we should all just cancel it. Is it too late to cancel it?
Unless we have it
Sadly, we
upstairs.
can't.
Have it up on the 26th.
We can't.
Can we have it on the 26th floor in the
26
kitchen?
done, sorted. Okay. Councillor Filipaina.
Chair, I know that we've mentioned the unitary plan quite a few times today. I've spoken to John Duguid, and I'm unsure if the committee wants an update on the appeals as a result of it closing tomorrow. So he is here, and I'm sort of putting that to you, Chair, if the committee would want an update on the appeals, as in the numbers and everything else. So that's just one thing. But if it's okay, Chair, just
No, that's a good idea. People will want to know. Mr.
before he
Duguid.
sits down, Chair, I just want to publicly thank you as well, as the Deputy Chair of the Unitary Plan Committee. And what's not known to the committee around the information is 70 to 80% of the independent hearings recommendations were actually accepted by them on behalf of the staff. You'll thank the staff, but I just want to thank you as well in regards to the leadership with the unitary plan over nearly 6 years. So thanks, John, and thank you, Chair.
Thank you. John.
Thank you, Councillor Filipaina. As of this morning, a dozen appeals, either confined to a specific site or a specific topic, and not in any way holding up the bulk of the unitary plan. So that's all pretty positive. Obviously, people have got until the end of tomorrow to lodge appeals, so we may receive some broader appeals, but at this stage they are fairly very confined issues, and that was one of the concerns with appeals, is they may hold up the plan for another 6 months, a year or longer. But these appeals are ones that we can work through and maybe resolve without a hearing, or perhaps they may need a hearing. But the good news is small numbers so far and very confined in terms of the topics they address.
Yep, it is.
Excellent.
It is.
Well, that's fantastic.
Yep.
Thank you. That's marvellous. What a positive note to end on.
Brilliant.
So we'll kind of breathe out and breathe a bit of a sigh of relief and declare the meeting closed. Thank you all.